Hello everyone and welcome back. When last we spoke, we were looking at Medieval in the form of a tier list. We were going through each of the levels from the original game, and then before that, we were going through the levels in the other two games, the following ones that came later, Medieval 2 and Medieval Resurrection. I thought we would give Mr. Fortescue a little break today and do something pretty different. What I would like to do is go through books and games. You got that. We got books, we got video games. What does that mean? It means we're going to be doing a kind of review recommendation list for each of these different mediums. Storytelling is a very important aspect of my life. Believe it or not, history is my background. I have a double major in history and philosophy that I graduated with in university many years ago. Long story short, I ended up switching gears entirely and going into computer science and becoming a software developer, which I operate as today. But my passion for books, for reading, for researching, as well as gaming, of course, has never left me. You throw in some exercise, which I try to do just about daily, and you basically have the big three in my life that sort of keep the mechanisms of my very being in perpetual and purposeful motion. So I thought I would start sharing those with you today, because as much as I love, say, the Medieval series and Retro series, I am all over the place and always looking for new things to try and enjoy. So here is how today is going to work. I have 5 books and I have 5 games. We're going to go through 4 of the books that I've enjoyed to various degrees. They're going to be like reviews and recommendations, and then do the same for the games. So 4 games that I've enjoyed to various degrees. After that, there will be 1 book and 1 game recommendation, and they will serve as my top recommendations for the latest 5 books that I've read and the latest 5 games that I've played. And then I will explain why. So basically, it's like those videos that you've seen where people have been talking about what they've played and sort of just giving a general, I guess, singular consensus of how they feel about the experience they had with that game. It's kind of like a review, but not one that's too in-depth, but I will provide some analysis in this video regarding both, especially when it comes to the games. Really, what I want is for you to relax. As always, I want you to put your feet up. I want you to get a nice beverage. I want you to sit back, and I want you to just enjoy what I have to share. And let's see what books we have to start with. Alright, and the first book we have is actually set within the gaming industry. No joke, it is actually a story largely about gaming, but it covers themes of humanity through this fictional story. It is a lovely, lovely tale told by Gabrielle Zevin, and it's called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. The book is in essence about love and companionship within the setting of the gaming industry within its youth, drawing both on Zevin's life as a gamer and also on various texts concerning game development, such as the work of Jason Schreier. A series of games are developed by the characters, and we are witnesses to a fictional construction of the pains that such labor has on its creative minds. You'll enjoy it. Narratively delicious, Zevin capably engages her readers with wonderfully crafted episodes of human pursuits in the medium of gaming, moving between times of toil and heartache, to triumph and delight with an easily enjoyable prose. Sam, one of the main characters, is well realized as both an individual who succeeds in his endeavors against unfavorable odds, and what appears to be an autobiographical expression of Zevin's own life. The same can be seen in Sadie, one of the other main characters, who is an effective companion to Sam, and in bringing out the dramatic events between them, expressing psychologically difficult experiences within these struggles with a strong clairvoyance. My only criticisms are that this is at times too much of a modern insertion of current-day game development, as we might see in the indie scene, into a time where gaming wasn't anywhere near this kind of spirit. 2 completely different zeitgeists collide and fold over one another in unfitting ways. Another is that there is an air of elitism in the setting, despite Zevin's attempts to retain a sense of organic passion for gaming from a more common upbringing, as opposed to the top-tier university environments we are enveloped in. It thus becomes a product of business-oriented sensibilities, which wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for the aforementioned modernity. It doesn't work well for me as a reader who's curious about love and wisdom within suffering, and it doesn't quite come together in my view given how focused the story often is on success, without Sam and Sadie challenging this given how damaging it is to them and to many others in the real world. But it's a recommendation from me nonetheless, as its prose grips tightly in its style, and the character arcs bear many points of satisfaction. The numerous game references are like mini hooks as well, very enjoyable, and it all remains together as a story worth reading. It's an absolute blast to read, and I think really what my complaint in the overview was talking about is the lack of universality that people might feel when they're reading this and failing to sort of see their own upbringing or their own class represented, as well as Zevin's capacity to criticize the depravity of an industry that was so exploitative in a number of ways. And I think that's something I will talk about at length in another time about the industry at large. But it is such a well-written book, I could not put it down, and there are some references she actually puts in the back of the book, including a list of, say, Schreier's works and some other people who have written about the history and origins of gaming. Not to mention, of course, that she is a gamer herself. So it's a lovely read, it's totally delightful, and I do recommend it, especially if you are one who loves video games. Shifting gears entirely now from fiction to nonfiction, we are going into the realm of history. And the next one is about the slave trade. It is Adam Hochschild's Bury the Chains. I was introduced to Hochschild while in university for a history course, the book of his being King Leopold's Ghost, which was about the horrors of the Congo at the turn of the 20th century. This one is about the slave trade in America, and by proxy, spends a good deal of time in England where figures like Granville Sharp, Alexander Falconbridge, and of course Thomas Clarkson were laboriously making the case against slavery in Parliament and to the English population at large. A flaw already comes to mind perhaps with this overview, and it is in the lack of focus on Africa itself. Hochschild indeed sheds light on the deprived means of engaging in the slave trade from the continent where they originated from, but I would have loved to read more on the history of various communities prior to the imperialistic kingdom's visitations. One good chapter, or better yet 2 or 3 more, would have done the trick, I'd say. He covers also the rebellions that took place among slaves across the Americas, the social diaspora among the white population here and in Europe, and the evolution of humanity's awareness in the horrific nature of slavery. This last notion is, I think, the book's greatest strength. As someone who majored in history years ago, I never take for granted one's ability to thread a multitude of details drawn together from dry and often opaque texts, to ultimately tell of the effects these past actions had on the people of that day. I remember writing essays in third-year university on banking structures and methods in modern Europe, and how financial access was provided to the public, and for offenders abroad, such as, settler colonialism, and all in the context of the laws of the time, further colored by its foundation in natural law and Christian social cultures. It's quite complicated and no easy feat. Above all, it is thoughtfully researched and pleasurable to read. Bury the Chains may mark for you the beginning of a path to learning history. That's not an exaggeration, you will really like it. And continuing on in the theme and vein of history, this one is a little more niche. In fact, it's quite a bit more niche based on the content. But the reason I'm sharing it is because I think anyone living in North America or even the West in general should be reading books like this once in a while when they can. This one I read recently is called The 7 Nations of Canada by Jean-Pierre Sawaya. This is the sort of book you'd expect to read in a classroom, as its focus never lingers outside the investigation necessary for good history. The 7 nations refer to a sort of indigenous confederation, an alliance of First Nations that serve many purposes. A form of unity within colonialism, a way to organize this unity of grievances and adapting to different requests, and a way to remain independent while also communicating openly with European powers, and that of the nations that inhabited further south of Quebec. It is dry and very concentrated on the facts as produced by what archives Sawaya could make use of for his research, and a quick glance at his references demonstrates a laborious effort in his historical craft. He gives no dramatized flair as Hochschild does in Bury the Chains as mentioned before, rather inviting the reader to undertake an examination of practices that escape the average reader of European heritage. This is good, and it is a challenge all of us should embrace more from time to time. I never knew about the Kawanake, its strategic impact on both Canadian and American history, and the sophistication with which it operated against all odds. Diplomacy, political relations, and rituals including feasts and gift-giving all beckon the reader to understand the beauty and wisdom once neglected, and still today taken for granted. It is an important read for anyone living in North America that desires an in-depth overview of 2 centuries that predate the Canadian Confederation, as they will be well rewarded with what is contained here. really what I would hope from a book recommendation like this is that if you're a fellow Canuck, you would look into something like this. It's not as dull as it sounds. It may not have the flair of Hochschild, but it's quite enjoyable nonetheless. But also, if you are from the US, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, you have a very similar history that you're dealing with. Knowing who was here first, what was taken from them, and what now needs to be done as a result of the knowledge we are given in well-researched books like this is crucial to moving forward. And now to something a little lighter. Well, sort of. Kind of. It's a very light and little book, and is something that I had the pleasure actually of going through again in little bits and pieces. But it is what you would call a time management book, oddly enough. And it is The Art of Time. Wow, what a title. Is he talking about Chrono Trigger or something? It is actually a book hailing from a genre of books I avoid with a deliberate distance, as I consider it to be predatory, and more often than not, a source of untruth. It is the self-help umbrella which I speak of, and where you might find this little guy labeled under. And yet, Servan Schreiber has gifted to us a personal account of time management that is personable, practical, and welcoming in its approach. This is time itself we are talking about, so it's remarkable to begin with that he presents so accessible an understanding of this elusive concept, and in so few pages. I appreciate this because it allows him to dedicate more writing into how one is to make use of it. You know, the sort of thing self-help books should be doing instead of gish-galloping the reader with studies that they didn't bother to research themselves. But I digress. The point is that the advice given here is plentiful and easy to return to. For example, in a chapter called The Time for Projects, he speaks at length about goals in producing meaning in our work. This in turn yields motivation, of course, and that is a catalyst. He uses a wide range of anecdotes to illustrate this, and I think that's one flaw overall, in that a few detailed case studies would have worked wonders in driving the point home. But I think Schreiber's elegance in portraying our capacity to manage time and simply to enjoy life are redemptive, and he's able to keep things simple and clear without betraying the reader in their desire for answers, and in so short a text. You're in good hands here. It really is the stuff of early education we uncover in a book like this, where we were introduced to these axioms at an early age and are in need of an engaging reminder for its truth in our lives now. Some of us take hold right away, and some, such as myself for instance with time management, are slow learners to what a good practice consists of. The author provides his remedies with elegant charm, always waiting in his pages should you ever wish to pay him a visit for a little advice again. You will feel delighted with every chapter you read, and it is, as I said, something that you can go back to again and again, as I have already done. I couldn't help but share this one with you, and I think you will enjoy it yourself as well. It's widely available out there, you can get it online, it's not hard to find. I was able to get this at a used bookstore sale for just a few dollars Canadian, so I don't think you should have too much of a time finding it in just about any thrift bookstore online yourself. I recommend it. Alright, let's talk about the first game. Most of the games that I actually played in the list I'm providing for you today were digital. I only have one physical here, and the first one I played on PC Game Pass, and that is South of Midnight. I have some thoughts about this game. As soon as you begin your adventure, a few things very quickly express themselves to the player. The artful display invites your eyes with a curious beauty and is a direction of artistry that never loses its visual style until the credits roll. It's a rich achievement in craftsmanship that I'd love to see more of in games. Another is Hazel and her mother, both of which grant us an introduction to the emphasis of relationships you'll come to follow and explore within the game's narrative. And it's immediately evocative in the emotional punctuations that were wonderfully voiced by their actors. Well done. And that goes for every character in the game that Hazel encounters, which tethers you to the world of Prospero more fondly as the Deep South's folklore shares its story beats with you. So to start, we have great characters, great writing, and great art direction. We then have music, which I won't soon forget as well, allowing South of Midnight to come alive even more with its beautifully composed tracks based off a variety of genres that I'm quite dumb to. It was the exposure alone that left a mark on me, and yet the music went further in its execution with depth and soul. And yet, with these remarkable features present throughout the game, it almost falters completely in its gameplay, which is not something I want to say about Compulsion Games' work. There is love across every chapter, felt in the natural scapes I did not want to leave, and a story I had to know more about as I turned each page of Hazel's adventure. But its combat unfortunately dried up for me within a few chapters, and by the last half of the game, I was completely uninterested in developing her skill tree given that your encounters require next to no strategy. This skill tree of Hazel's is straightforward at best, as we've seen it all before when it comes to providing boons to certain abilities in an action game. The average gamer will have seen something like this many times prior, and I'd venture to say they'd be dulled by its lack of imagination just as quickly as I was. These abilities are unlocked by collecting spirit essences scattered across the lands of the south, sometimes laying around you close by, and at other times off the beaten path. It's rewarding in the early game, the tried and true service of an action game that lets you reap the fruits of your explorative labors for the strengthening of your character's skills. It doesn't translate though into what should evolve Hazel in the way she deserves, rather adding minute increases to certain effects or a small stun that has little effect in the battle's overall management. The enemies themselves, which are damned as the most repetitive aspect of the game, and there are many such encounters across South of Midnight. It bogged what should have been a majestic quagmire experience beset by a devotion to music and storytelling, tearing the player away from the game's strength and into the tendrils of dulled animosity. In essence, the best the game has to offer is summed up in this point provided by their website. What is omitted in this description is what I wish they could have figured out. But to end on a positive note, I'll long remember my time simply perusing the interiors of various structures. The detail is astounding, and it is often in these moments that we cherish touching instances of the game's literature for world building and for our emotional satisfaction. It ranks among some of the best in this practice, along with Naughty Dog. If Compulsion Games can retain their successes in South of Midnight and reframe their approach to gameplay composition for their next project, we'd best not let it slip us by. In spite of my grievances, I look forward to their next creation. The highs are high, as they say, and it was the highs in the strengths that I characterized in my overview there, which really kept me afloat with my interest in the game. And there is another game that's coming up on this list that will have that same drawback as well. But I wouldn't let that stop you from experiencing this game, even if it is just the cinematics that you've seen online drawing you into it. It's a beautiful story. You will have some absolutely great moments and instances in South of Midnight, and that alone might be worth it for you. So why not give it a shot? It is still on Game Pass, and it should be for some time since it is Xbox Game Studios. So keep it on your mind. You might like it much more than I did, and that would be great. Give it a shot. Next up is also a game I played on PC, and it is none other than a little indie game recently released you may have heard of, The Blue Prince. Apart from the little mention we got in the February State of Play by Sony, I went in blind. I was intrigued by the idea of a changing house, regardless of the critic score to come. Even if it had received only lukewarm reception, I was committed to trying it. But as things stand, it's been universally lauded, and I share their awe-inspiring warmth with what Hondaros and his team at Dogubam were able to accomplish. There will be no spoilers here, don't worry, but you play as an adolescent boy who is to inherit a manor on one condition, that he reach the final room of the palace. As great games do, it is not that simple. You possess a central goal, but the Blue Prince experience is all about everything else. That is, the joy of experimentation, where as you familiarize yourself with the room's functions, you begin to pick up different strategies in how you organize your path upon the manor's grid. You learn from your mistakes and note your encounters, literally, with vital information that you come across, which is decorated beautifully across the various room types you'll use to carve your way to room 46. And all in roguelite fashion, which I'm here for. Even days where I barely made it past the first few rows never felt cheap, and always gave me something to write down for posterity's sake in future runs. What I love most about it though is its ever-present aura of mystique set within the manor's layout, agnostic of whatever building plan you mustered. It ceaselessly retained my engagement to uncover the deceased owner's background, the scattered and hidden letters conveying family secrets, and even lore pieces that help you uncover what is behind the grand mystery of the property you're challenged to make sense of. This is buoyed by musical interjections that match the room's theme, or a somber set of sounds that come alive once you've connected certain pathways within the property. Without saying too much, the Mount Holly estate is so much more than the tabular rectangle in which you select and connect your rooms within, and that is the gameplay satisfaction operating in the aforementioned mystique, where all you can prepare for is to be surprised, again and again. So while the game's central goal is to reach room 46, the Blue Prince is rather like life itself, not about the end, but rather what we built along the way. There are very few games like this, and of its caliber. It was apparently developed within the span of 8 years, and it's clear how much care went into the countless functional nuances of room bonuses, color coordination, unique uses, and their overall connectivity. I cannot imagine the dev hell cycles that must have cropped up at various times during the game's production. That they were able to pull this off with such polish is a testament to the integrity of game design we want to see. If you have even a little spark for roguelites and puzzle games, this is screaming your name, and you'll never look back once you've spent your first few runs at Mount Holly Estate. So grab a pen, some paper, boot up your device of choice, and just jump in. This is something I had done with my parents with older games, retro games, when trying to make sense of the layout, and instead of relying on the internet, which we're more able to do now, we use our memory crafted in the pages as we do, say, with literature, which is what we've been going through together. So you have a traditional sense that brings out an interest that you may not have known was there before. It always comes with starting something that you may not have tried or may not have thought you'd enjoy trying. So once you do get pen to paper, which sounds like a chore at first, you realize then you cannot stop, and it actually helps you engage the material of the game itself more. Don't let the blueprints pass you by. It is incredible. And next up is a very interesting one for me, also a recent release, and one I played on Game Pass along with South at Midnight. It was arguably my most anticipated game for this year, and I would say after having played it fully, I don't think it quite fulfilled what I was looking for in the game, but it was definitely not a bad experience. That is none other than Doom: The Dark Ages. There is a lot I love about this game. If I had to choose what the strongest aspects of id Software's new title was, it would be how the actions and animations of Doom Guy himself articulate what inductions of the player's wishes are with remarkably smooth connections. Each combat encounter is a space to enjoy an ebb and flow of menacing imposition, building off the particularly grueling and darkly enthralling glory kills from the previous title. Its increased focus on melee approaches to fighting is exactly what I could have wanted in a Doom game, and it controls like a dream either by mouse keyboard or controller, which in my case was with the Series X version. Each parry launched me into a deeply satisfying crunch or shatter of my opponent, and I didn't ever tire of my up-close and personal finishes. Well, to a point, but we'll get to that in a moment. Suffice it to say that you are the badass you're meant to be in hammering through waves of demons with, and id Software fully delivered on the superb nature of arcade-flown combat, which was only enhanced, of course, by the arsenal you pick up as you progress. Fans of the channel may be having a momentary throwback at the thought. It is visually impressive, and this is from someone who played on a 3060 Ti card. If your PC is beefed up even more, you're in for a major treat. And this is along with the art direction nicely consistent with the other games, Doom Eternal especially. The soundtrack bangs, though not quite as punctually as the previous two games, due in part I suspect to the switch in the music artist chosen, but fitting and sure to enhance your time when your boot descends on a demon's head. I also had no issue with the story. This is after all what I most pursue in my gaming experiences, and it was fine. Certainly nothing that leaves a mark, but suitable to the theme and context of the world. The Titan experiences are a nice change of pace, as is the dragon riding, and are a welcome delight. Both felt a little underdeveloped, and yet served as a purpose and gameplay deviation that I thought were well enough, really. I wouldn't care to see them in a future title, but I have no hard feelings to these additions, and I think they add more value overall. All that said, there are some negatives to go over. Most disappointing is the game's inability to stretch out its campaign experience while retaining my engagement. I was enamored throughout the first half of the game, but by chapter 14, and to note there are 22 chapters in total, I was beginning to lose interest. And by chapter 18-19, I completely disregarded any secrets and treasures in an effort to get the game over with. That's not good, and this is due to several factors. 1. The level design is rather uninspired in many cases compared to its predecessors, easily being overshadowed by Eternal and 2016. Few secrets are well constructed, but I rarely had to scratch my head in order to access the goodies barred from reach. This is fine for the first while of the game, but it didn't develop as the prequels had accomplished, not even close. In this respect of design, it is the most straightforward of the modern Doom titles. Second, the enemies lose appeal quickly, and it was a rare occurrence in which I was impressed by an initial encounter when introduced. When you're in late game, they all blend together as generic entities where the combat is entirely carried by your character's physical capabilities. Third, which folds in from the previous 2 points, is the game's length. Simply put, it overstays its time, dragged down by the aforementioned cons in the level orientation throughout the game. There was no interest to explore, a key part of Doom, and it rippled into a lack of interest in upgrading what remaining features of my arsenal beckoned within every shrine to come. And this is id Software we're talking about, one of the pioneering studios of gaming. They're absolutely able to go further, but perhaps next time. So do I recommend? Overall, yes. In fact, I would say not only if you're a Doom fan, but also if you're a God of War fan. Something I loved about 2018 and Ragnarok was the intimacy of player character extensions into combat, which I feel with resounding similarity to Dark Ages, and for the better. The puzzles too are similar in form to what you'd experienced with Kratos, but for the worse here I'd say. Do not expect the thrill and ever-maintained and invigorated energy you first experienced with Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, but there's certainly enough to enjoy here and carry with you once finished with hurricanes stormed deliciously into demon armies perished by everyone's favorite first-person shooter one-man army. It has 2 incredible titles that preceded it, so I don't know why this was something they kind of dropped the ball on when it came to exploration, navigation, and the world in which you are beset as the Doom guy. But this is definitely not a bad game. I cannot stress that enough. If you have Game Pass, what are you waiting for? Give this game a shot. It's fun. And next is actually the game that I have physically here. I'm a huge JRPG fan, and I'm an RPG fan in general. This one caught me off guard, and it's strange because I've heard it mentioned so many times by both friends and other content creators that I enjoy watching. I let it slip me by for far too long, and finally, I got the PS5 version of the game and did not stop playing it once I started, and that is Sega's Yakuza Like a Dragon. There is so much to love about this game, but what captivated me almost instantly was the story. It appears curious at first that we see so many figures not apparent on the game's cover, but it immaculately sets the stage for our protagonist with the values that matter within his environment: loyalty, family, and sacrifice through love. Ichiban Kasuga, right from the game's prologue, became one of the most lovable protagonists I've had the pleasure of encountering in some time. He is flawed, a total goof, and even deeply naive at times, but he cares about his family and extends this fidelity to the characters he meets along the way in his venture for order and justice in Yokohama District. Really, the spirit of the story can be seen manifested in Ichiban's physical appearance and character. One that has a free-spirited projection into a chaotic world, just as his hair alone would indicate, but also a restoration of peace where this chaos finds itself, and inevitably onto our path as we proceed forward. Like a Dragon's story somehow doesn't take itself seriously, and yet develops these characters to highly emotional stages of the narrative all at once, smoothly pivoting from wild and raucous to the somber and tragic. Very few games can accomplish this, and the studio's writers must be given their flowers for this. A nice raise would be good too. Speaking of that, the business management minigame is one of the best I've played in recent memory. I don't know if I'd put it on the same tier as, say, Blitzball or Chocobo Hot and Cold from Final Fantasy X and IX respectively, but it has a gradual hook that pulled tight once the ideas of the process clicked for me. It's also a great way to make money early and mid-game, only enhancing the motivation to repeat your runs for capital. It even has a story, which is a pleasure in its own right, and there are many more games to enjoy around town. A golf driving range, trivia examinations, karaoke rhythm games, reaction timing in order to stay awake in a movie theater, and even old school arcade games actually situated in arcade machines within arcade vendors. Who would have thought? You may not like all the games, but that's the point. There is enough for nearly any player to enjoy if they want a breather from the main story. My complaints, however, are twofold. Some side missions are underwhelming in their content and feel like filler. I didn't encounter any I truly didn't like, but very few captivated me, and I eventually left them behind in pursuit of grinding experience and just pursuing the main story's progress. Personality traits also, which I know to be a staple of Sega RPGs, did not connect throughout Ichiban's world, and I largely left these opportunities untouched at no cost to my overall progress in the game. Yes, it's meant to help further side missions and more hidden areas that may reward you somehow, say an extra mission or weapon, but I felt no desire to build in these traits. A shame, as I see potential in this system. One more issue is some of the commentary within the game's world. I mentioned that it doesn't take itself seriously within its story, but this can have consequences when not managed carefully. Most striking to me was how it portrayed homelessness, and this hit poorly for me as someone who has volunteered with such individuals in recovery centers and correctional facilities. The fact you can combat them and even participate in a minigame making light of their struggles by collecting litter is literally punching down on those less fortunate, which I couldn't help but take personally as someone who knows a number of them by name in my own city. I understand this could serve as a mechanism to comment on the social restrictions leading to these conditions, but Like a Dragon failed to convince me otherwise and left a sour taste despite being a great game in so many other ways. These thoughts aside, I recommend the game nonetheless. No game is perfect, and there is so much that strikes the irons hot in Ichiban's adventure, extending so much of why we love RPGs into its cauldron of delectable activities. Its mechanisms are thoughtfully molded into the city you inhabit, and if you're like me, they'll be on your mind even when not playing the game. A JRPG to me is best in its gameplay when its variety of developmental features combine to achieve an overarching system that allows the player an ever-expanding excitement in how they and their characters grow. This can include unlocking an ability, affording a coveted item or weapon, access to a secret area, or any general notion that enhances your party's strengths. When working together, these can create what is an almost addictive world that becomes a source of fondness for any experience given, where it is felt that in one success, another is created or allowed for. It creates this loop, or rather a self-nourishing matrix of risk-reward mechanisms that carry you through this creek of lily pads, all satisfying from one little pad of joy to the next. Yakuza Like a Dragon doesn't quite reach its peak, but it comes close and is an amazing effort nonetheless that stands as a shining example against other titles of its beloved genre. Alright, and my top book recommendation, which I actually used as a resource for a couple of my past videos, which articulates the use of space in a philosophical sense, and that is Gaston Bachelart's The Poetics of Space. Immediately the title grips you, yes? What could it possibly mean? Well, he remarks in the introduction on the study of poetic imagination, and I don't think the book ever veers from this notion as it explores the idea of space and metaphysical, phenomenological, and even social reflections. Should you ever choose to join Bachelard on his adventures in this fascinating walk among modern philosophy laid gently in its pages, you'll consider what a house is. Yeah, that's right, a house. It after all is the conventional idea of what one would call home, and Gaston proceeds with blissful whimsy in his chapters analyzing the concept as a whole, but also its constituent parts. For example, one's room and the intimacy given by us to a space in the house which extends a crucial part of our being, and by proxy thus associate with the house's structure, what we call home. You'll see musings on drawers, chests, and wardrobes. That's actually the third chapter's title. What the house is corresponding to with the universe, what is the reality of miniature, and what corners of a room indicate about our reality. By the time I was finished reading about something as seemingly trivial as the oft-ignored corners inescapably existent in any structure we inhabit, I was writing and dreaming of the desert sands, practically drowning in the longings revealed within the sentiments felt following the author's ability to invoke beauty from something always present, yet never given time for thought. Unless you're an architecture student, maybe a philosopher, or an over-caffeinated coffee addict, now obsessively wondering again about its nature. When I was working on one of my medieval videos, various levels struck me as expressions to points given in Bachelard's text. One beautiful example he gives is, "On the stairs of the trees, we mount," referring to an attic in a cosmic sense. I immediately felt awe for the skybox in Cemetery Hill in response, with its escalated hilltops reaching between 2 points of space, land and air. Even the dreaded ghost ship became a momentary fascination within this context. I could go on, but this could easily turn into a medieval video, and the point really is that it has begun to change the way I view games in my immediate and reflective experiences. I return to it once in a while for a little poetry and perspective because it is so moving at times. It's a lovely book, accessible in its conversational approach to complexity without sacrificing the attention such profound ideas deserve. I highly recommend it, and that's without even mentioning all the anecdotal poetry within. It is packed with humor, depth, beauty, and of course, wisdom. This is exactly that, taking you into this world you may not have explored, or even something you thought you had known before, and taking a look at it from a totally different perspective. This has shaped not only the way I look at video games, but poetry. As with the Poetics of Space, you're thinking more clearly about the usage of certain indications and punctuations that elicit a kind of mood or thought, bringing awareness to yourself as though you're a canvas and you're seeing certain colors come to life you didn't quite see before. It may actually have that effect on you. So it is a book that will well reverberate into other books and even mediums, such as other games, that you didn't know was possible. So that is without a doubt my top recommendation for you from what I've read recently. The Poetics of Space by Bachelard. Give it a try. And now for my top game recommendation. I cannot believe it took me this long to play. It's only been out for about a decade, so it's not that old. But this is a PS4 generation game, and I just don't know how I was able to let this pass me by the way it did, especially given that I am such a fan of Kojima's games. And that is none other than Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. I couldn't ever imagine Boss taking his missions into a sprawling, living, war-infested ecosystem, and without any concession to its legendary storytelling. Metal Gear Solid 5 accomplishes what no open-world game has done before or since. It's an awe-inducing environment curiously fictionalized from that of our own in modern history. The ways in which Mother Base, resource allocation, weapon development, combat, mission strategy, and more all connect together stole my attention to its contents for many hours, anchored in a narrative with emotion-sweeping cinematics and voice acting. I still cannot believe what they've pulled off here, and as someone playing it 10 years after its release for the first time, it's only more impressive that it stands tall against the best we're receiving into the current year of 2025. Whenever the sounds of movement in the helicopter's gust whipped into the carriage and out from my TV speakers, I giddily leaned forward in anticipation of getting into action. It could have been for a story mission, a few side missions, or even just trying to pick up recruits or a little resource farming. No matter the cause, every little nuance in the game's mechanics built itself into an immense purpose that never leaves Boss when he's in the player's hands. The sense of freedom growing with each successive mission is something that hit me with great satisfaction. You are given the limits of your imagination to complete your tasks, and the countless online videos of bizarre achievements in the game testify to this brilliance in MGS5's composition. I kept things pretty straightforward, often with bullheaded aggression, but I learned to experiment with new weapons and items eventually, and this led me to further experiment based on how gratifying it was to complete a mission with a newfound intuition. For example, there are side missions where you have to simply destroy a squad that consists of at least one heavily armored vehicle. There may even be a tank or a chopper hovering by. I often called in a rocket launcher to make quick work of the machinery, but then thought rather to take the pacifist path in Fultoning the damn thing, where Fulton refers to forcibly ballooning a person or item back to your base, and then putting the rest to sleep for recruitment. Only in a Kojima game could you see an advanced military tank being lifted and whisked away by a giant balloon. Never gets old. It's also between two environmental sandboxes you'll still be able to venture through, Africa and Afghanistan, with your weapons, preferred buddy, and strategy of choice. Further, most of your missions advance some kind of narrative, major or minor, when successfully tackled along with some shocking moments that strike from nowhere in classic Kojima fashion. In many other games, you're hitting spots on a map and pursuing points of interest for gains to your character or some kind of progression that's often repetitive or uneventful. In MGS5, missions bear the developer's craft in their deliberate creations, doing something unique apart from one another, and all perfectly cast into a loop, where you may be doing other matters at hand like scrounging for resources or intel. You will always have something at hand, and it's never the same if you're involving yourself with the world as presented in The Phantom Pain. It can be a lot at times, as with any Kojima game, but the phenomenal casting and writing will do loads to support your engagement with the complex story unfolding through your efforts. Remember, no one who first plays these games escapes the victimhood of lore saturation. It's tough, and we've all been there, but it's worth it. I don't want to say much more. Like with stories in video games, I don't want to spoil other elements as they're a delight to see and use for the first time. I think you should go in with your eyes fresh, navigating reference content online only if needed. It may be a slow start like it was for me, but once it clicks, it will not let you go, and you will revel in its grip on you, grateful that games like this are possible to even exist. And I really don't want to say that much more. One of the interesting things about The Phantom Pain is the way it explores language. Language as a weapon, as an artifact, and as a part of who we are. 2 continents, 2 different geographies, and yet you have people with the same goals and the same forms of chaos taking place. Really, where the game shines is the gameplay. You will not be able to stop enjoying the gunplay and increasing your armaments, your staff, and the ways in which you experiment with Big Boss in the world. If you think you've played it all and you haven't played Metal Gear Solid 5 yet, then you have not played it all. I cannot believe what I encountered in this game, so I will say no more other than play it now. And that, I believe, is going to do it for today's list. What did you think? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Any recommendations or suggestions that you would have for me? I would love to check them out if you have anything to say. For example, shameless medieval plugin, I just picked this one up too, and I think this is something I will do maybe a little mini review in the future. Graphic novels are not something I normally read as well, so I'm always looking for something new. It's a really short guy, so this shouldn't take me at all. I could probably get through this in a night, and I'll do my own little analysis of it at some point, given that I'm a medieval fan. But it's never a single genre or set of genres in literature that I'm looking to pitch myself in. I'm always looking for new things, so please recommend away. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for stopping by.